Welcome, Glenn, to UVU, Utah Valley University. Thank you so much for participating with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it has been a pleasure this past week and a half. We've been diving deep into the Glenn Garland cinematic universe and having some fun. I've got a lot of people here in this audience. It looks like we've got about 25 people at home, and we've got about 30 people here. What do you guys think of the film? Here, and when the people ask questions, they'll either be on Zoom or they'll come up to where I am. Okay.
Cool.
And I'm going to start with a few questions. I actually have way more questions. I would love to just, sit down and chat with you for a long time, but I'm going to save some room for, I already have a queue here if people want to ask questions. So my first question is, can you just, for those of us in our group, we've been studying about you and kind of know a little bit about your background, but for a lot of the other people at home, they haven't done that. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you got into editorial and got the editing bug and where that all started? And
Yeah, I first got the film bug when I was in high school and took a film class and didn't think that it was a realistic goal at the time, but I just couldn't shake it. And so when I graduated, I got a business major, and I started minoring in film at USC, and then decided, you know what, I'm going to flip those. So I decided to apply to USC Film School and went there. And then while I was there, I was writing, directing, doing all the different things. And I was sort of working on two tracks. I was shooting a lot of stuff, and I was also editing a lot of stuff. And I happened to be shooting somebody's film that was sort of a low budget short. And I talked to the producer, and he was my camera guy, and he said he wanted to produce. And then like a year went by, and then he called and said, do you want to edit this film? And I was still in film school, and I said, sure. He said, it's just deferred. And I said, well, I'm paying to go to school, so yeah, I'll edit it. So at night and on the weekends.
Glenn, can you just mention what that means to these guys, what it means to do deferred work?
Deferred. So that means to not get paid or to get paid later. It was, once the film makes money, we'll pay you, which
means,
just so you guys know, usually if you work deferred, you're never going to see a dime. You're doing it for free. But sometimes you'll get lucky, but usually creative accounting, they never have, even if the movie makes a lot of money, they somehow didn't make any money. So did that movie, cutting that at night and on the weekends, and then ended up really enjoying it. And that led to more work. I was sort of struggling to get more films after I worked on those first few. So I went to a place called Corman, which is Roger Corman. It was called Concord Pictures, and he was king of the bees. He was very famous at the time. He sort of started Ron Howard's career, and Jonathan Demme, and Francis Ford Coppola, and lots of people. So I went there hoping to get some work and started cutting dialogue there because they didn't need any editors. And that led to cutting trailers. And then that led to editing movies there. And so editing movies there led to working with different people, and those people started going off and doing other things. And so that's kind of how it evolved.
Sure. So many, not just the big names at Corman Land, but so many below the line people I know who started off there too. Can you tell us a little bit so that people know? You said that they didn't need editors and you started cutting dialogue. What does a dialogue editor do?
Well, at that time, it was still on film. So it was just smoothing out all the dialogue, making sure that any clicks or pops were taken out, making sure that when they record different backgrounds, some backgrounds are loud, some are quiet, and then a loud background going into a quiet background can be jarring. So you'd smooth out everything. It's pretty similar, but now done on Avids and Pro Tools and stuff like that.
Right. Okay. So cool. I've got two more questions before we let these young impressionable minds on you. I know you first through Editors on Editing, right? That's where I first sort of
Cool.
was aware of you. I'd seen several of your movies before then, but I just was aware of you there. And I mentioned to you that all these guys, just in their very beginning editing class, we showed the Tom Cross and La La Land interview. So can you tell us a little bit about that, about how that started, and then and kind of what it is for the people who aren't part of the class who are just watching. But also, I'm curious if there's, with all these amazing editors that you've spoken to, was there anyone who just sort of, is there anything that stands out? I'm sure there's tons of things that were just like kind of changed your approach to different things. Did you ever kind of meet someone and just kind of have a light bulb go on or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the way that started is I was nominated to join a organization called ACE, or American Cinema Editors. And ACE is an honorary organization of like the best of best editors. And so you get nominated. And so I was nominated, and they want you to participate as much as possible. And I was telling the head of ACE at the time, I said, we really should have editors interviewing editors, because every time I hear these interviews, everyone is talking about budgets, or they're talking about what it was like to work with this actor, and nothing was really a deep dive. So I said, you guys should do that. And they said, okay, do it. And I'm like, I'm not an interviewer. And she said, you just said Editors on Editing. You're an editor, talk to editors. So, I just started doing it. And, it's hard to say what stands out. There's so many little tidbits. And I think that through osmosis, I probably have picked up a lot of different things. Tom Cross is so eloquent. He's one of my favorite people to interview. I think Joe Walker is fantastic as well. I just spoke to Eddie Hamilton about Top Gun. That will come out soon. And he was so enthusiastic, and he was great. And just, it's just a community, and it's sort of grown. Apparently, we have 500,000 listeners, so it's pretty good.
What's so funny is I always associate that with Edit Fest, and I miss pre-COVID Edit Fest because I used to take students down there, and I always had a group of about 5 or 6 students there who would just go start talking to anybody and everybody, and it was so nice that at least in this one sort of niche in Hollywood, people were so open and friendly with each other and accessible. It's really great.
Yeah, editors are good people. They, what we do is we have a huge impact on the editorial process, and yet we are kind of behind the scenes. So we're rewriting, we're creating the architecture of the film with images, and rewriting the script with those images and performance, and it's a huge thing. And to be an editor, you kind of have to be okay with the director taking most of the credit, but you're the director's right-hand person. You're in the trenches with them.
I have the last question I want to ask is just a personal one. It's something I've been thinking about lately, and it kind of clicked. I was listening to the Mikkel Nielsen interview of Sound of Metal, which is a movie that just was very influential for me a few years back. And he had said something that kind of echoed something that our person at CineSkype a month ago had said. And they were talking about comedy, but he was talking about drama and the concept of earning it, right? got to earn that emotional moment or that laugh.
Yeah.
Can you kind of help me wrap my head around just what that means? I mean, I kind of know what it means, but I've just been thinking a lot about it and kind of communicating it with students. But can you just give me your...
Yeah, I mean, I think that earning it, what we do is we take written stuff that's not necessarily based on true people and put actors performing it. And if you have anything that's false, it pulls you out of a movie. I mean, one of the biggest juggling tricks of an editor is to make sure that every single actor and every single moment is real. Because if it's not, you start realizing, oh, I'm watching a movie, and it sort of pulls you out. And so earning it really means, I think, getting people to just invest and relate to the characters, to go, you know what, I see myself in that person. And that sometimes you really have to push, and you have to really continue to calibrate and continue to go analyze every single moment, every single shot, every single beat, and go, is this beat and is this moment and is this part really serving the show? And you have to do that really fast, because you also are on a deadline, and you've got lots and lots of producers who are saying, we got to get this done, we got to get it out. And so there's commerce and there's creativity, and you're battling those two things.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. We're going to start bringing students up. You're going to tell us your name and maybe your track. And come on.
Greetings, Mr. Garland.
Hey.
Ethan Dobbin, I'm in post-production and we know each other. So
Yes, we've met. You came out to LA and we had drinks.
It's been a great time. So I was curious if there was any particular scene or sequence that you had issues kind of putting together, if something didn't quite flow right, that then you managed to find a way to make work.
In Black Box?
Specifically in Black Box at this time, because that's what we just watched.
Okay, yeah, let's see. Black Box, I think that one of the things that was very tricky about that was balancing the dream world and where he was in reality. And that we constantly kept going back and forth, trying to figure it out, because it's scripted, but we did a lot more intercutting than was in the script. We also had to figure out things that we thought we were able to do in the script, but they weren't landing. And so that was a huge hurdle to really make you understand when we were in the dream world, when we were not in the dream world, and also when to reveal different elements of the guy who was cracking, when to reveal different elements as far as when you saw people's faces, when we revealed different clues that would then echo in the real world. So that was a big issue. And surprisingly also, though she comes off, I think, quite well, the little girl was coming off not very real. She was too cutesy, and she was wonderful, but at the same time, you weren't buying her. So we had to really dig deep in her performance, pulling out certain things. A little went a long way with her. And so that was a big element that we had to work with in Black Box.
All right, thank you so much. I look forward to hearing the interview on Top Gun.
Excellent. We have Preston at home.
Hi, I'm
Hey.
Preston. I'm in the cinematography track at UVU, and I was blown away by the movie and the editing, Black Box. Sorry, Black Box. And I was kind of thinking, and I always think about this when I think about editing and other editors, is their involvement kind of with the production and with post-production. I've heard of some editors being on set and others that aren't. What's your preference, and how involved were you with production? Because this seems like a movie where you kind of would have to be pretty involved in. It's a complex story, and so I don't know. I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, I mean, usually I don't have the luxury of being on set. I'll go and visit sometimes, but what they generally want you to do is they generally want you to cut the footage that was shot the day before. So on Tuesday, you're cutting what they shot on Monday, because they are going to maybe strike that set and they need to know that they've got that. And they need to know that they have all that material. So I'm cutting that as you guys are shooting. So I'm trying to keep up as much as I can with the shooting. And that way I can also be talking to the director or the DP or the script supervisor or whoever needs to be communicated with about what's working and what's not working. And if something isn't working, or there's, for instance, the focus puller isn't working out, or some of the lenses have a flare that was not supposed to be there, or the sound mixer is not getting good audio. I need to be able to communicate that to different people in the crew. So a lot of times I'm cutting that stuff and they will be asking, oh, can you send a little cut to the set, or can you send some stuff to the set so that we can see what you're talking about? And so I'm constantly working in conjunction with you guys, but I'm generally not on the set. Sometimes I'm on the set in that I'll cut close by. They'll have a trailer and I'll be close. And if they have a question, they'll ask me out. And a lot of times I'm also sitting with the director and the DP as we're coming up with shot lists before we go, because sometimes that's helpful to sort of know, okay, do we have enough coverage? Are we over covering stuff? With Black Box, every day, Emmanuel would send me his little map of different cameras where he was thinking about shooting everything. He'd give me a shot list and he'd go, if we get into a bind and we're running out of time, what can we, what should I shoot last? Because I need to know what we can get away with. And so a lot of it's that, really trying to figure out what's needed.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Hello, I am John Hintz. I'm in the writing track here.
Hi, John.
I can speak for myself, but we've all been having a blast watching everything that you've worked on. I've watched a lot of the editors on editing myself, but I was watching your interview on, what's it called? The Spoilers Alert Radio, right?
Uh-huh.
And so you've worked with a lot of musicians, right? And you've done music composition yourself.
Yes.
Wondering what you like, any advice you have on film scoring and using music to enhance edits.
Yeah, I mean, and you'll sort of see this with some of the editors on editing interviews. If you can have a composer start early, it really helps. It really helps to work in conjunction with a composer, because once you put in music, it changes the whole dynamic and it changes the feel. And some composers are going to put more music and some aren't. A lot of times, if I don't have a composer, I'm creating a lot of temp music. And with the things that I've composed, it's mostly not necessarily me on a keyboard composing, it's me getting different tracks from a composer and then being almost like a DJ and mixing all these different tracks in different ways in order to create score. And so it just so happened in a couple of the movies, Rob preferred what I was doing than what was being given to him. So we sort of worked much more hand in hand. And because Rob Zombie is a musician, the two of us really sort of honed a lot of the score. But you know, I do think that it is helpful if you can get a composer on early.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
All right. At home, we have Gabriel.
Hello. Thanks so
Hey,
much for being here. I'm Gabriel Schaefer. I'm studying post-production. And I just had a question about trailers, because you said that you cut trailers for a while. And I was wondering, compared to the films themselves, how much freedom would you say that you had in cutting that the way you wanted? Like, were the higher ups telling you, this is how we want to do it, and they just like give you that footage and you just had to do what they did, or did you have a bit more creative freedom in that?
well, I mean, thank you for your question, Gabe. When I was cutting trailers, I was at a place that was almost a renegade Maverick type place. So we were given a lot of freedom when we were working for Roger Corman. It was a lot of people still call it the Roger Corman Film School. It was all these different people who had just graduated from school doing crazy things. And so with that, I was able to have a lot of free reign. I have a friend who owns a trailer company, and so I do know a little bit about some of these other things, and I still do sometimes cut trailers on movies that I've worked on. I know that Rob Zombie especially liked us to cut the trailers. He was always happier with our trailers than he was with the trailers that they would create. But a lot of times when you're cutting trailers, you do have a lot of creativity, but it's sort of an interesting thing because what will happen is it'll almost be a bake-off where you'll have different editors and they're all they're given a little bit of like, we want to tell this story. And then you'll sort of create a trailer around that story. And then that'll be compared to all these different trailers, and they'll watch, the executives will watch like 10 trailers and be like, I like 2 and I like 8. The other ones, forget. So, and you're still getting paid, so that's great. But a lot of your work might not ever see the light of day because it's a bit of a bake-off. Now, that wasn't the case for Roger, and it's not the case in certain places, but when you're dealing with a movie, say Top Gun, they're probably gonna have 90 trailers cut and pick like the 10 or the 3, their favorite 3.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah. I mean, trailer cutting is a whole different, it's a whole thing in and of itself, but it's a very creative process.
Whoever's next. All right, cool. We've got confusion at the line here.
No problem.
Hello,
Hey,
Michael, I'm studying writing.
awesome.
And so my question is kind of a big multiple question, but I'll spell it out for you. So you worked with Robert Rodriguez on the Werewolf Women of the SS trailer for Grindhouse. I love Grindhouse. Death Proof is one of my favorite films. And I'm imagining that with a pair like that, who have such a specific vision and care very much about what they're delivering, specifically with that project, since it was such a passion project for both of them. First of all, what was it like working with them? Tarantino is mine, and I'm imagining many others' favorite filmmaker. What was it like working with them? And then when it comes to the B-rated cult classic horror genre, that kind of thing that they were going for, specifically with Planet Terror, how much freedom and inspiration were you allowed to bring into that, and how much of it was you executing their exact vision? If that was all mumble.
Yeah, totally. So with that, those trailers that you're referring to, Werewolf Women of the SS and Thanksgiving and a bunch of others, those were basically Robert and Tarantino picking their favorite directors and having them do these trailers. So for that, it was Tarantino especially going to Rob and going, I really want you to do a B movie trailer. And so Rob was given a certain amount of money and shot that. And that was me working with Rob, but that was very much of Rob and I, like Rob was shooting Halloween or Halloween 2, I think, at the same time that he was directing that. So for that, I was given a ton of freedom. But also with that is it was a little bit too long, and so it got cut down. I'm wondering which version you saw, because there's a long version and then there's a shorter version.
Saw the shorter version. I heard that he was actually planning on making a longer version. I was wondering what's it like to cut a trailer for a film that doesn't exist but could potentially exist, but you have like Nick Cage in at the end, and so just what cutting that is like.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was a lot of fun. Rob, because it was that kind of movie, it was, let's do split screens, let's do freeze frames, let's just think out of the box. Let's really, the key was, and the key with a lot of Rob's movies is he wants it to feel like the 70s. So if it didn't exist after the 70s, don't use those techniques. But in the 70s, that was one of the most creative time for filmmaking, period. So you could like do all kinds of crazy stuff, rollouts and, you know, anything. And so we just played a lot. And with that, Quentin and I had a very long talk afterwards, because Quentin was such a huge fan of that trailer and called me, and we talked for like 2 hours. It was mostly Quentin talking for an hour and a half and me basically listening. And then not that long after that, I was hired by Quentin. He was producing a movie and he was having trouble with the director. And so he asked me to help recut it with him. So he and I worked together for about 3 months on that, which was a blast. And he's just, it's weird because he has this ability to just quote lines from movies, and it's not, what you see is what you get. He can talk about something that was shot 30 years ago and quote a line that's very obscure, and he knows like music. Oh, well, in this movie, there was this piece of music, and I love this piece of music, and let's listen to that. And so he's just an encyclopedia. He's amazing.
And what film was it that you cut with him?
We recut a movie. It's not very good, but it's called Hell Ride.
Okay, that's cool. All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, but you can check it out.
Awesome. We've got Moses at home.
Oh snap! I didn't expect you all to get to me.
Hey,
But
Moses.
howdy. Nice to meet you, Glenn. I really enjoyed Black Box, but I wanted to ask more. I was just barely checking out your IMDb, and I've seen you've been editing for quite a while. I want to ask what the experience has been like going from your earliest editing experience all the way to now. Like, what are the, hurdles you've had to jump over to adapt to new technology that has, since come out since you first started editing?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started cutting, there was some digital editing, but a lot was still being done on film. I cut my student film on 16 millimeter. I cut my first few movies with 35 millimeter on moviolas over at Roger Corman's. And then I saw the writing on the wall and saw that things were changing quick. And there was a movie that a director that I worked with wanted me to do. And she said, just tell him that you know the Avid. Just tell him, because I want you to be my editor. And I'm like, okay. So I got the job, and then I called up a friend and I said, you got to show me how to work the Avid, because I don't know what I'm doing. But that's kind of how my career has sort of been, just jump into the deep end. Like when I cut my first feature, I had never cut anything on 35. So I'm cutting at night and on the weekends on 35 millimeter. I had only cut 16. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had enough creativity and enough friends that I sort of got by. And that way I was able to start cutting right away, as opposed to a lot of people, it takes a long time being an apprentice editor and then an assistant editor and then an additional editor and then moving up to editing. So for me, I was lucky. I was cutting my first film when I was 20. So as far as surviving, the more that you work, the more connections you make. And it really is like, if you're a good guy or gal, if you're somebody who people like to work with, and you work hard and you're creative and you have good ideas, you'll just start making more and more contacts, and that will help you move to the next job. I know it's sort of scary being freelance and sort of going, how am I going to make a living at this? And it is harder at the start, but the more that you work, the more connections you make. And then it just more and more jobs snowball. And, with, for instance, Poker Face, I had an opportunity to work with Ryan Johnson on Looper. He ended up hiring Bob Doucet. Bob and I went to film school together. We're friends. And, but he remembered me, and Ron Bergman I had worked with. And so when Poker Face came up, he was like, well, Bob can't do the whole series. I want Glenn to edit, the finale and some other episodes. So it's just contacts, and it's who you meet, and you just keep trying to work hard and be available to people and be nice and easy to work with. And so it's definitely doable. What are you thinking about pursuing?
I'm not entirely sure quite yet. I love editing, but I've also loved cinematography and producing. So I think it's one of those three that I'm going to be pursuing.
Yeah, for me, it was the same way. I'm not producing, but the other two. And I think that, one of the great things that I will say about editing is it does touch upon so many different parts of the craft. It's about now visual effects, music, performance, cinematography, story. So you're hitting all those, but you're also sitting in a dark room all day. So that's not for everyone.
Sounds like the thing for me. So maybe I will have to pursue that. So, well, thank you. I really appreciate your answer. And I look forward to seeing more of your movies.
Awesome.
Hi, how's it going? I'm Eric.
Hey.
I'm in the writing track.
Cool.
And you're talking a little bit about the script of Black Box and how some scenes have like less intercutting, so you guys felt the need to change it. As an editor, do you feel like you need to stick to the script as is, or because you're kind of part of, ACE, which is awesome. Like, do the directors give you creative freedom to tell the story how you feel works best?
That's a great question. I know that certain editors just stick to the script and other editors go with their gut and whatever works. I'm sort of in between. I will try to make it work with the script, but if the script feels like it's the script is sort of scaffolding and it's a guide, and sometimes you'll just go, I think I do need to intercut a little bit more here. I'll never cut out lines of dialogue before the director has a chance to hear them, because I might have a lot of ideas of what we can cut, but I'll never do that. Sometimes I'll cut out of a scene where they have them exiting out of the room or entering into a room. That's the most boring thing that you can, all that shoe leather.
Yeah.
One thing to learn as filmmakers, as writers, as directors, as editors, try to start at an exciting moment in the scene and end at an exciting moment in the scene, rather than having the air pulled out. Sometimes you need that to sort of build, but there's nothing worse than shoe leather.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Who's next?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey,
My name is Carlos, and I'm going into the directing track. And I actually had like a question. You kind of, like the last question kind of like went on it a little bit, but like, how is it working with like directors? I've seen like, or I've heard how you work with Rob Zombie, and I feel like that's very different. For the most part, I feel like you guys are very in tune with, like, you kind of know what he wants. But how is it with like other directors? Are they constantly in the work with you, or what?
well, it depends. I know that TV is very different than features. I mostly do features, but I do go to TV a lot now because the writing is so good in TV. But when you're working on a feature, you are spending many, many hours with that director. Some directors want to be there all the time. Some directors will give you notes and leave. Some directors will give you notes and then start working on the script for their next movie. And so basically, it's, in the best sense, it's a great marriage where you two just have a great time, you get along, you don't mind spending 10 to 12 hours in a room together. They're asking you what you think, you're asking them what they think. You're trying many different versions and going with what everybody feels is going to be the best version, and you're playing. And so that is that track. With TV, that's more of a showrunner guided situation. So with TV, a director will get 4 days. And then after those 4 days, then it goes over to the showrunner and the producers, and then they'll recut everything the way that they want it to be. So it's a little bit different in TV.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's what was my main question, like about features, about how you work with the director. And so, yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of times it's very similar to the way that I work with Rob. It's always when you start working with a director that you haven't worked with before, you're sort of getting a sense of each other. And I'm trying to understand their vision, trying to get in their head and trying to understand what story that is important to them and the way that they like to tell it. Some directors like to cut a lot. Some directors like to hardly cut at all. Some directors are really technically based. Some directors are very story based. Some are very performance based. And the best ones are the ones that sort of understand all three. Like Ryan Johnson's really great at all three.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Sure.
Hi, Glenn. My name
Hey,
is
I'm sorry, what was your name?
John Hagan.
Hi, John.
So my question is, you probably know a little bit more about this. When working with TV, probably more so than features, typically you work with a few more editors, at least from what I've seen. You kind of have 2 or 3 editors on something. How do you combine kind of your different styles to kind of create a cohesive experience? Because sometimes I don't even notice that there's 2 or 3 editors. It seems like it's just one kind of cohesive thing.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that's sort of important, especially on a series that's been going on for a while, like I jumped on to season 5, I think, of Vampire Diaries. And so for that, I just watched a lot of Vampire Diaries and sort of got a sense of the style of that show. Because I'm not going to impose my style onto a show that's been going for a long time. And so you're sort of, in a way, trying to calibrate. And whenever you're editing, you're trying to get into the head of what does the story want? What's the vision of the director? And so for a series, it's similar. When you're working with multiple editors on a series, generally you're just editing that one episode. You're editing that episode. It's not usually 2 or 3 editors on an episode. But you still don't want your episode to be totally different than the episode that's going to be tomorrow or next week, or if you're streaming it, like you don't want it to be like whiplash. So for that, I think it's really trying to calibrate to what's the style of that show. Now, if it's a first year show, especially if you're cutting a pilot, you're establishing that blueprint. And so then after you've established that blueprint for the pilot, everyone's sort of working a little bit off of that to use that sort of style.
Thank you. That was very insightful.
Sure.
Yeah, another person coming up here. One more.
As many as you want.
Hello, my name is
Hey.
Smith. I'm also going into post-production.
Cool.
And obviously, like a lot of us have said, I really enjoyed watching Black Box, but in preparation for this, I actually went back and liked watching a lot of some of your older work. And one in particular that stuck out to me was 1990 Bad Jim.
Yep.
And I was just curious. I mean, first of all, I'd be happy to hear anything you have to say about that movie, but kind of going along with it, I was curious as an editor how you are able to help work with, if you maybe have a particular actor that's not doing as well as the other actors, how you would help make that as serviceable and good a film as possible if maybe one of your actors is lacking.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned Bad Jim. That movie starred John Clark Gable, who was Clark Gable's son, who had never acted before in his life. And when we auditioned him, he was great. But you get him on set and you start rolling the camera and he was as wooden as any tree that you've ever seen. And that was tricky. I mean, Bad Jim goes way back. So I have a lot more tricks in my toolbox than I did at that time. But a lot of it is sometimes how other people are reacting to what that person's saying. Sometimes it's trying to see if there's any way to, any time that actor is more present. Sometimes actors sort of go to sleep when it's not their line, and then they come alive when they have to say their line, and then they go back to sleep. You want good listeners. You want an actor that really knows how to listen. And so sometimes those guys who aren't as good, maybe they're good listeners, maybe they're just not good actors. And so you could go to them at reacting. Sometimes it's playing stuff wide. Sometimes it's pacing things up. If you sort of are cutting somebody off a little bit, it might seem like that person has to keep on their toes and they're stuttering and you're cutting them off. That might make them very interesting. So it's a lot of it's just playing. And as far as Bad Jim, you went way back into the archives. That was the third project that I cut, and that was with a director that I had done my first movie with, and that was an experience because the director had the film pulled away from him, and then I was working at the studio with the producers, and then the director got back on it, and it was a whirlwind, especially for like a 22-year-old.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, that's our night. Glenn, I really appreciate this. I want to follow up with one other question, which isn't too different than what other people are asking you, but you've done so much in the horror genre. And so I guess this is a two-sided question, because you've also done so much in like every other sort of field. And this black box is really interesting because it sort of feels like this kind of almost horror-ish psychological thriller, but it also has this real pathos and sort of emotional sweetness, towards the end. And I just wonder if first, just if you could talk a little bit about these different genres and the very different types of films that you've made over the years. And if there's any sort of, I don't know, trick to that. But then the other side of that is, I know editors get pigeonholed, right? And that if someone's cutting a lot of horror, it might be really hard to do King of California, right? Or a light comedy or family or something like that. So how have you been able to stay out of that sort of typecasting sort of situation?
Yeah, I mean, it takes effort. I have to turn down a lot of stuff. I fortunately have an agent that's very supportive of me turning down stuff that might not be the best in the horror genre, and waiting for something that's more indie and more interesting. Sometimes I'll take pay cuts to work on something that I'm just very passionate about because I love the script and I think that the director has a lot of promise. As far as pigeonhole, yes, this business, if you do something well, they're gonna keep trying to have you do that exact thing. It's insurance for them. So I feel like for me, I've always tried to mix it up as much as possible. When you're working with a director who mostly works in a particular genre, that makes it tricky because you feel loyalty to that person. And so generally, if Rob's going to do something or John Pogue is going to do something and it's going to be in the horror genre, I will say, yeah, we're going for it because I just want to work with that person. But the thing about anything, whether it's horror or drama or a comedy, the key for me is to make it as real as possible. With horror, it's, for me, I don't like horror when I don't believe it. I want people to feel like they're a fly on the wall and they're not supposed to be seeing what they're seeing. And like some of Rob's best movies are like Devil's Rejects or Lords of Salem, because they feel very real. They feel very anchored. The movies that don't work as well are when they're a little bit flippant, and that's not to say that they shouldn't be funny. I mean, comedy is a huge release, and there's comedy in real life. And the best comedy also is sometimes reactions, because it's how it's hitting other people, because you're the audience. It's how it's hitting you. So you see a reaction, you can relate to that reaction. Comedy is best when it's not being played to like wink, wink. Now, that doesn't mean to say that that can't work, but generally for me, I feel like most invested when it feels real. And so I'm always going, whether the story is, whatever the story is, it could be the most fantastical story, but I want it to be real. If aliens came to the planet, those aliens actually came to the planet. And everything that I'm trying to do, as long as the director's on board, because sometimes the directors want to play it more kitschy. But for me, if it's real, people will go on that journey and they'll get sucked into that story. They'll get sucked into what's playing on screen. And so for me, it's all about that.
Well, that's perfect. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us.
I will also offer this because I love students and I love trying to pay it forward. So if your students are people who want to contact me, they can get my email from you.
Sure.
And I'd be happy to answer further questions, or if they come out to LA, we'll have coffee.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much, Glenn. It's been an honor. And let me know if there's anything in here in this recording that you kind of don't want to.
Everything's perfect.
It's good. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and post it. Thank you so much, sir. We appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. Your class was great. Great questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.